Hey, welcome back, everyone. I'm so excited for day three of Asia's largest HR and work tech conference, People Matters Tech HR Singapore 2020 Virtual Week. Now, after the fantastic start to the day, it is my pleasure to welcome a globally respected writer and executive consultant on people analytics, data driven HR, and the future of work. David Green. Now, David is the managing director of the People Analytics program at Insight 222, and he helps global organizations create more cultural and economic value through the wise and ethical use of people data and analytics. So, first of all, thank you so much for joining us, David. Now, in this session, David will outline the key trends in people analytics and provide examples from companies who have used a data driven approach to achieve positive business and employee outcomes, as well as improve the impact of HR. Now, before I pass it on to David, let me also remind all of you today that we will be running LinkedIn Most Active Author activity, and we still have the Marshall Bluetooth speakers for the winner. So remember to keep on sharing your learnings, your takeaway, and your wow moments from the conference and from your various different sessions to stand a chance to win the prize. Also, don't forget to use the hashtag TechHRSG while posting your comments. Now, let me pass it on to David. Welcome, David. The frame is all yours.
Thank you, Jeremiah, for the kind introduction. It's always a pleasure to speak at a People Matters event. Big thank you to Esther and the People Matters team for everything they do to support the community. I'm just sorry that we can't all be together as planned in Singapore, not least because I always enjoy spending time in the country. Brief intro to me. So my name's David Green. I've worked in the people analytics space since 2013 and been in HR roles all the way back to the late 90s, without showing my age. I spent a few years at IBM, and then Jonathan Farrar and I and a few others who'd worked for big companies in people analytics set up Insight 222 in late 2017. Jonathan and I are currently writing a book, Excellence in People Analytics, which should be out in the first half of next year. So we're going to talk about people analytics today. It's the fastest growing area of HR. In many of the organizations we work with at Insight 222, which is around 70 global organizations, people analytics teams have been doubling, tripling, or even quadrupling in size. They're growing even where the overall headcount in HR is either static or shrinking. And they're increasing the scope of work they do. So people analytics teams are increasingly being responsible for strategic workforce planning, org design, employee experience. And many of you are probably in those teams at the moment. And as I will touch on later in the presentation, that's not changed due to the COVID crisis. People analytics teams are still growing, and I'll present some research which supports that. So what we're going to cover in the next sort of 18 minutes or so, I'm going to attempt to answer three questions. First of all, the what. What is the business value of people analytics? Why is it growing? Why has it become even more important in the crisis? Question two, why has it been elevated? What are organizations doing with people analytics to support their response, recovery and reimagination of the workplace due to the crisis? And then a how. I always get asked, how can we get better at people analytics? So I thought at the end I'd leave a few tips for HR professionals themselves on how you can get better at people analytics within your organization. So as I said, let's start with the key trends and provide some examples, some case studies of how people analytics can drive business value. So first of all, many of you will have seen this. Let's go back. Let's go back in time to January 2020, just before the crisis really hit. LinkedIn's annual Global Talent Trends report came out, and people analytics was classed as one of the 4 trends that talent professionals themselves felt were most important to the future of HR. And what's quite interesting, if you look at all those 4, they've probably become even more important this year. I think the big feature of the crisis has been the focus on employee experience by organizations. Internal recruiting is even more important now, and people analytics is supporting a lot of organizations creating talent marketplaces to actually personalize internal recruiting more, link it with learning and the skills that the organization requires. And perhaps the second crisis, the equity and racial equity crisis of 2020 that came out of the US, we're seeing that it's not just about a multi-generational workforce, it's about having a diverse and inclusive workforce. And again, people analytics is supporting that. So although people analytics was called out alone as a trend, it very much underpins the other three. And just some stats on how people analytics has been growing in the last few years. Firstly, I think it's now widely recognized by both HR leaders and business leaders that people analytics can drive performance. From the business perspective, they can also support efforts to improve and understand the employee experience. So what we're seeing really is, pretty much, there's 91% there from an Accenture report in 2019 of business leaders now recognize it can help drive improvements. The middle stat, 69% of large organizations, that's organizations of 10,000 employees or more, now have a people analytics team. That piece of research is a couple of years old, so I suspect that is now even higher. It's very rare now that I speak to a large organization that doesn't at least have some people analytics capability within it. And not surprisingly, the influx of skills that we're seeing into the space, into HR, working in people analytics roles, either people coming from outside, maybe in previous analytics or data science roles in areas like marketing and finance, but also HR professionals themselves, upskilling themselves in analytics. So it's a very healthy part of HR to be in. Why is that? Not going to go into this particular slide in detail, but I do suggest those that haven't, do check out this paper. It's freely available from the World Economic Forum on HR 4.0. These were the 6 imperatives that the researchers, which included Willis Towers Watson, Unilever and Saudi Aramco, who led that with the World Economic Forum, found is the imperatives for HR moving into the 2020s. This report came out at the end of last year before the COVID crisis. And I think you'll see, if you look at those 6 areas, all of those again have become even more resonant, even more important during the crisis. But again, if you want to do all of these things, you need people analytics to underpin it. If you want to build agile and personalized learning, for example, you need to have data to do that. If you want to enhance the employee experience, you need to understand that. So again, you need data to do that. So let's be clear. People analytics can and has contributed hundreds of millions of dollars to both the top and bottom line of organizations. So let's bring that to life with a couple of examples. First one is from Swarovski. And this is a really good example about having the right sponsor in the business can unlock the door to value from people analytics. So what's very interesting about this particular project is the people analytics team first of all was trying to solve an HR problem. The HR problem was around attrition, first-year attrition in the retail stores in the UK. So we were asked to get involved in this at Insight 222. We looked at it was a 53-page statistical report which had been done in R on attrition in the UK retail business. Great statistics, really impressive piece of work, but there was no real story. So we just asked who the business sponsor was, and then we found that this was more of an HR-driven initiative, as I said. What they'd done with the project is they'd identified that if they did a couple of things better, they could improve retention in the retail stores in the UK, and they could save around 300,000 euros a year. That's nice, but fairly limited impact. What the team did then was very clever. They actually went to someone, a senior sponsor in the business. They went to the head of the UK retail business in Swarovski, and they said, "What do you think about this?" And she was quite interested, but she said, what would be far more interesting is if you could actually understand what the impact is on conversion rate. Very important business metric in retail companies. And conversion rate is effectively the number of customers that come into a store to the number of that buy. So the people analytics team went away, they expanded their research, and they identified these 5 factors that had a big impact, the people factors that had a big impact on conversion rate of customers in store. 2 of these were what they'd found in the initial study around retention in the first 3 months of employment, and actually a pay rise for those new employees as well, making sure you time that pay rise right so people didn't leave. And they found other attributes around the staffing and scheduling of personnel in the store. They found attributes around the store manager themselves and around sales consultants, around training of staff as well. So they found that if they got these 5 levers correct, what had initially been a 300,000 euro saving was actually a multi-million euro benefit to the business in terms of actually moving that conversion rate up. What's really interesting about this, obviously, this is a huge finding, a huge potential improvement to the business. The people analytics team were asked to go and present this to the Swarovski board. The Swarovski board was so impressed that they then asked them to expand this research into all their retail stores in all the different countries in the UK. And it really, sorry, not in the UK, in the world. And it really put the people analytics team on the map, as it were. So second case study from National Australia Bank. Again, it exemplifies the importance of having a business sponsor and tying some of the HR analysis and bringing in business data as well. So this was a hypothesis that a senior leader had. And as we'll talk about later, the great thing about people analytics, you can test hypotheses and opinions with analytics. And their hypothesis that where their branches had good leadership and high employee engagement and the right team, then they had higher customer satisfaction and more profitability within the branch. So they came to the people analytics team, said, look, we don't really know what people analytics does, but we guess that you can help us with this particular project. So the people analytics team, instantly thought, well, this isn't just about bringing HR data together. We need to bring consumer data together as well. So they worked very closely with the consumer analytics team within the bank. They brought together 10 years of data at a branch level, an individual level, customer satisfaction scores, going back 10 years, sales results, revenue, information from finance around branch profitability, branch location, opening and closing, all that sort of stuff together. They bring in all the people data, including engagement data. They also brought in some calendar and email data using Microsoft Workplace Analytics. And they brought all this stuff together, and they found some findings. They actually proved the hypothesis. They found that in branches with the highest employee engagement, the customer satisfaction was twice as high. And the key elements that they found were a highly engaged team, good leader, tenure in role. So if they had a number of people who'd been in their role for 2 years or more, and safety. And what we mean by safety is incidents reported in the branch or absence from the staff. And because they had longitudinal data going back 10 years, they were able to test for the direction of causality. They found that if a good leader replaced a bad leader, engagement would start to go up, tenure in role would increase, or retention would fall. Retention would rise, safety incidents reduced, and eventually that had a knock-on effect on customer satisfaction, loyalty scores, and branch profitability. And they found it worked the other way. Where a good leader was replaced by a bad leader, eventually that had a knock-on effect on employee engagement. That had an impact on attrition. People started leaving the branch and the organization. They had a rise in safety incidents and absences, and eventually that had a knock-on effect on customer satisfaction and profitability. So really powerful. And again, this tied in with some academic research as well that showed in sales organizations or in organizations such as banks, employee engagement can account for up to 20% or 20 to 25% of the company's revenues, which in this case is $1 billion a year. So again, really significant business benefit from people analytics. So let's look next at how it's been, how people analytics has actually helped organizations during the crisis. And it has to be said that many of these stories are coming out. I know in Tech HR in India, you had, for example, David Shantz from Nokia walking through some of the work that he and his team have done there. And we found that with writing the book, there are a lot of stories coming out, and you will see that a lot of them are anonymized at the moment, unfortunately, but I will share some of those with you now. But as you'll see, as we come out, hopefully from the crisis, you'll see more stories coming out as to how analytics has supported organizations. Some of you may have seen this article in The Economist a few months ago, but I think it's worth highlighting here to really bring this to the core. So the key takeaway of this particular article is it likens the role of the chief HR officer in this crisis to that of the chief financial officer in the global financial crisis, i.e., the chief HR officer is at the center of the organization's response to this crisis. And certainly I just recorded a podcast with Diane Gerson, the CHRO at IBM, or actually who's just recently announced she's retiring from IBM. which comes out today. And she talks a little bit about that and what that means for the CHRO. Diane is one of the people that is featured in this article, along with Beth Galetti at Amazon and Marla Singh at Electronic Arts. And it talks about how they're helping their respective organizations during the crisis. Critically for people analytics, it also highlights how each of those three companies has benefited from their current capabilities, their existing capabilities, and their investment in people analytics. And it pulls out a quote like that says that people analytics is become even more relevant in the crisis. That is completely echoes the research that we've conducted at Insight 222 and my own experience of speaking to 20 to 30 people analytics leaders a week. The consistent message I hear is, I've never been so busy. My work has never been elevated as high in the organization, regularly to the CEO on a weekly basis. And the work they're doing is first and foremost about employee safety and wellness. And just to back that up a little bit, what we're seeing really is, people analytics teams still growing in the crisis. This is some research that we did at Insight 222 around 75 of our clients. And we started this research during the crisis and finished it in the crisis. And what we found is 54% of HR teams have still decided to grow their people analytics teams in absolute terms. And in relative terms, compared to the rest of HR, more money is being invested in technology and skills and people analytics than in any other part of HR. So how has people analytics been elevated by the crisis? So it was already important, but as I said, it's been elevated by the crisis. And just as the people analytics teams at Google, IBM, Microsoft were elevated in the global financial crisis, so those organizations that invested in people analytics in the last 3 to 5 years are really reaping the benefits of that investment now. So it's central at responding at 3 stages to the crisis. First, in response, it's helping ensure employee safety and business continuity. So this is typically around bringing together HR data with external data from the job, like Johns Hopkins, bringing together with business data, understanding, are our employees safe? How can we ensure their safety? Where are they from a locational perspective? Who's in office? Who's working from home? And business continuity. What is the impact of potentially having to close, for example, as one organization we work with, their distribution center on the East Coast? People analytics predicted that distribution center would be shut in early April. They got there within 2 days, and that meant that the organization were able to make contingency plans for distributing to the hospitals and the pharmacies that they serve from other parts of the US. So really important during the crisis. In terms of recovery, a lot of it, as I said, has been a focus around employee safety and wellness. Suddenly, a lot of people who've never worked from home before are having to work from home. So in the early stages of the crisis, for a mixture of using surveys and passive data such as calendar and email data, understanding how employees are feeling, understanding what employees need. Is it just equipment to do their work? Or as in one example with an organization we work with, identifying that they were worried about not being able to get out and get food. So the organization actually organizing food drop-offs for some employees. Is it around, actually, we've suddenly got my kids at home as well that we need to school, and both parents work, for example. We've got elderly relatives to look after. Organizations responding to that, allowing some of their people to maybe work part-time, recognizing that they might be working irregular hours. Or it will be to understand things like collaboration. Are we still getting our work done? How productive do we feel at home? What is the impact on wellness and burnout? And using people analytics to support that. And then in the third part, it's around reimagining. So this isn't just about returning to the office. Some organizations are finding that people are quite happy working from home. They say they're just as productive. They're looking at the signals around wellness and burnout, and they're not seeing those, so they're quite happy to do that. But what is the impact on innovation? What are the types of work that we can do from home, maybe more productively and quickly than we can in the office? But what are the types of work that we need to be together to do, such as some of the more innovative and creative work? And again, in the podcast that I highlighted that published today with Diane Gerson, she talks about a jam they did at IBM where senior leaders virtually held conversation rooms with employees, participate in a series of questions, some of the findings that they found was that 2/3 of IBMers said that actually they really value the office as a hub, and they value the office as a place to go to build their networks within the organization and learn from others, to be mentored and to build community. They found that another third, typically those that had been in the organization longer, that already had those networks in place, were happy to stay at home forever. So again, those sort of insights are really helpful to planning that workplace on the future. And just one example, running down on time here, recent example linked to the crisis and Rabobank. There's a link there to the article, but it talks about how by doing regular listening and surveys and other listening techniques with employees, senior managers within the bank are able to understand how employees are feeling and communicate and act accordingly, and able to reshape the next survey perhaps based on the feedback that they got in the first survey. And this isn't just asking traditional survey questions. This is asking open text questions as well, really understanding, what people like about working from home, what the challenges are, and again, helping Rabobank plan for the workforce of the future. So very quickly, I just wanted to give, in the last couple of minutes, some help really to HR professionals. I'm always asked by this at conferences. I don't have the opportunity to speak to people directly after the speech today, so I thought I'd highlight this. So firstly, I want to focus on two things. Number one, HR professionals told us in research that we conducted over the last 2 years at Insight 222 that only a third of their organizations offer training to increase data literacy and analytical savviness. And again, only a third say their HR VPs are data literate and analytically savvy. So there's a huge opportunity for organizations and HR professionals themselves to get more familiar with people analytics. Other research that we've conducted here, when we went out to people, HR professionals, say, what is the one skill that you'd like to learn? And they told us it was people analytics. So again, there is that energy, there is that ambition from people in HR to learn more about people analytics. But what should you focus on? If you want to be a people analyst, you probably want to focus on all of these, particularly the middle four. You want to focus on how to bring data together, how to clean data, how to do analysis. You learn data science techniques, you'll learn packages like R and everything else. But that is not most of HR. Most of HR don't need to become data scientists. Let's kill that misnomer now. What most HR professionals probably need to improve their skills in is around understanding their business, understanding what are the key challenges facing the business, understanding what the people factors of that are, and actually framing business questions, working with people analytics teams and stakeholders within the business to frame business questions and build hypotheses which can be tested by people analytics. And then understanding the business, taking the insights that come from these studies and actually presenting that in a language to the business, to the stakeholders and sponsors in the business that compel action to be taken, and then helping the business take those actions and measuring their impact. If we just focus on the top two here, I'll leave this with you. I'm not going to go through this in detail now. The way that you frame business questions is you need to understand the business. This is not about HR. You saw those examples from Swarovski and National Australia Bank. They're very much about the business. How can we improve conversion rate in our retail stores? What is the impact of employee experience on customer loyalty and retention and profitability? These are business questions that you can answer. You need a sponsor in the business to help you to do that. And you typically using consulting and influencing techniques to actually really break down to what the questions are. And from a hypothesis, it's a statement. If X happens, then this happens. Can we test that using people analytics? These are some examples that I'll leave you with. The deck will be available to people. Typical HR process questions down the left-hand side, what the people analytics focus questions are in the middle, what the typical hypothesis is that you can test. And I'll leave you with this example from Nielsen. So this is Nielsen, big data company. One of the first projects that they did in people analytics, the people analytics leader spoke to business stakeholders. The business stakeholder, or the person that ran the consumer business unit in Nielsen, told them that they felt that attrition was having an impact on the business. So the head of people analytics and the team thought, okay, this is something that we can test, but we need to get some questions that we can answer. So firstly, what is the financial impact on the business of people leaving? Is it a problem? What are the factors that make associates or employees more or less likely to leave? What could we do about it? If we can answer those questions, that's going to be helpful. They then went out to the business and to HR business partners, and these were the two main hypotheses that came back. One, that women and diverse employees were more likely to leave, and two, that employees that work remotely, either on site at a client or work remotely from home, were more likely to leave. They found that the first hypothesis was not true. They found that the second hypothesis was true. They also found something else. They found that the big challenge within this organization was around internal mobility. And if someone had been in the same role for 2 or 3 years, they had a 49% more chance of leaving than someone had been in a role for less than 2 years. So the HR response to this was to really develop the program around internal mobility and make that a conversation with the CEO on a quarterly basis as well. And they improved attrition and saved. The financial impact, as I should have said, was $5 million for every percentage point of attrition. So they actually zeroed in what the business challenge was here as well. So if there's one thing to take away from this presentation today, it's that people analytics is not about HR. People analytics is about the business and the workforce. It's about improving business outcomes like profitability, customer satisfaction, and it's about improving employee experience, employee retention, employee opportunity within the organization. And if you want to tune into the podcast that I publish every week, there's some examples on the side there. I publish articles regularly on LinkedIn, and I'm also one of the trainers on the My HR Future Academy as well. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of the conference, and thanks again to the People Matters team.
Thank you so much, David. Now, that was truly so engaging and informative, and I'm sure all of the audience members have taken note of the trends that are so relevant in today's times. So thank you, David, once again. And what a great start we've had to the day. Now, joining us next is Chirag Shah, Cornerstone On Demand, who will share his distinct take on embracing the reskilling revolution. Now click on the next session details in the agenda tab to join us for this session. See you guys there.